feeling good, can I tell?
Zoom over to the books.
So, recording is the.
No, I didn't do it yet. I'm getting ready to press the button right now. Oh no, it's recording. Yeah, it's recording. Okay, hold that family. My name is Brother Ray.
Oh, right. Okay.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Amos Wilson, Louis Ray Rivera, Brother Hassan, El-Haj Malik Ashabaz, Minister Khalid, Brother Gil Noble, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, Professor George Simmons, Miss Leona Maddox, and all the historians who gave up fame and fortune, gave up a lot of money because they believed in history and telling the truth. They sacrificed a lot. Miss Leona Maddox, in honor of Miss Leona Maddox, United African Movement. She had an old car, a Toyota, and she drove from Teaneck, New Jersey, with the Teaneck or Patterson? Teaneck, all the way to the United African Movement, because she believed in bringing people together. So we keep this lecture series going to honor these people. Brother Harold. So, for the people that came out to support the William Mackey Jr. History Club and the live audience, and also our Zoom family, give yourself a big hand for participating. So let us know that it is a few people that are dedicated to history and lectures and bringing people together. So we're going to bring the camera over to the Amos collection. We have these books to help Brother Sababu and African World Info Systems to continue the great work of Dr. Amos Wilson. We have Blueprint for Black Power. We have the latest Amos classic done by Sababu, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat toward the Reclamation of the African Mind. You have Black-on-Black Violence, the psychodynamic of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. And you hear a lot of people talking about black-on-black violence, safety, crime. You have every politician and big city mayor and you name it. Nobody ever mentions Amos Wilson classic work to see how the trick bag of black-on-black violence has been perpetrated. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order, Garveyism in the age of globalism. The falsification of African consciousness. After reading that small book, you could spot a phony 2 blocks away as soon as he opened up his mouth. Amos will explain it. From our latest civil rights leaders, local politicians, read The Falsification of African Consciousness. Amos is the best.
No doubt.
The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child. And I'm just finishing, I had to read it again. Issues of Manhood in Black and White. The inclusive look into masculinity and societal definition of the African mind, African man. It's a bad book. Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children. S.K. Damiano Cruum, Distorted Truths, the Bastardization of African Cosmology. In honor of Earl Ponder, who left us too soon, revealing the unspeakable Bible verses, the truth about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and the Holy Trinity. Sister Empress Jamaica, confronting the color crisis in African diaspora. And in honor of Louis Ray Rivera, who come out of the Marcy Project, with my whole family, good brother. Jazz in Jail, And when Professor Mackey left us too soon, and we tried to continue his work down here, Louis Ray took up the mantle, and he would come down here and speak for hours. And we would walk him home, and he still talked for another hour and a half. Unbelievable. So we have these books. Now we'll have some more publications. That we have in honor of these great people and their sacrifices. I picked this up about $1 something at The Lost Jews, the last of the Ethiopian philosophies. And you had heard everything about Hebrew Negroes and all this. Well, this book is a pretty decent book I picked up. In honor of Big Harold, who left us too soon. I didn't know nothing about the transfer agreement, the untold story of the secret pact between the Third Reich and Jewish Palestine. This is on a Big Harold. Dr. Randy Short, who was fierce on the Thorough Black Talk radio program with Sister Keisha, Tad, and Ashe. Dr. Randy Short, The Impact of Religious Slavery Revealed. Charles Hamilton Houston and the Struggle for Civil Rights. We have a lot of civil rights leaders. And a lot of people claiming civil rights and ain't pay no dues. But they want civil rights. And they're giving it to them too. They're getting it. The Invention of the White Race, The Origin of Racial Oppression in Anglo-America, Theodore Allen. One of the greats that ever lived, black man of the Nile and his family, Dr. Ben. We didn't have too many computers at this time, and Dr. Ben went beyond the call of duty, so we have this in honor of the great Dr. Ben. Cynthia McKinney, When China Sneezes, from the coronavirus lockdown to the global political economic crisis. You have a lot of people in the great state of Georgia talking about they care about black folk. Cynthia McKinney, in my personal opinion, is the only one that cared. And them same people that's in there now got her out of office. On orders from other folk.
That's right.
Went against her. So Cynthia McKinney. Sister Carol Alexander, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide, White Rage. We have this. And I got a couple of the most power-packed documentations of Dr. Scott Whitaker out of Georgia, The Causes and Solutions to Disease, Malnutrition, and the Medical Sins That Are Killing Us. Dr. Scott Whitaker's book, Med This Sin, S-I-N. Him and Joseph Fleming did an excellent. So we have this book, and he's out of Atlanta. Edward Downs, forwarded by Robert Kennedy, Causes Unknown, the Epidemic of Sudden Death, Unknown Causes in 2021. Edward Downs did an excellent piece on this book. And he was an analyst of BlackRock. The Irritated Genie. Jays Are the Problem. It's a small read, but it's going to take you a long time to do the research on the information that the Irritated Genie has put out with this publication out of Washington, D.C. And his website is War on the Horizon. And two of the classics. Robert Kennedy, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, The Real Anthony Fauci. Bestseller. And Dr. Joseph McCullough and Ronald Cummins, The Truth About COVID-19. These books are unbelievable. So we have these, and we encourage you to get them. So you can do your own reading, and you can do your own research to get information. The books are there. So I'm going to give you some community events and information within the global black community. Thorough Black Talk tomorrow on Facebook Live, correct, Tad? And YouTube. Tad, Keisha, Brother Ashe, Brother Blacksmith, and Sister Marcia. And if you were tuned in last week and listened to Dr. Randy Short, oh boy. And you can go into the archives and listen again. They will talk about it tomorrow. One of the hottest programs on the East Coast. Sister Empress Chi and our Philadelphia connection, Blog Talk Radio. Every Saturday at 10:30. The telephone number is 1319-527-6189. Million Women's March. Saturday at 10:30, you can tune in, and Sister Empress goes beyond the call of duty with guests and speakers and people throughout the United States that give you information. One of the hottest shows on the East Coast. On Mondays at 10 a.m. in the morning, every Monday, out of Birmingham, Alabama, Brother Anthony Muhammad, WSYP 95.1, Sankofa Radio, Io Comanche, War Near Rising. The Irritated Genie has a program that will knock your socks off. And if you tune in to WSYP Revolutionary Radio, Sankofa Radio on Mondays at 10 o'clock in the morning, you could actually call in and ask questions. This man has went beyond the call of duty, and you can get all the books and tapes that he had on War Near Rising. Our Baltimore family, State of the City, Saturdays at 12 o'clock and Wednesdays or Thursdays on Instagram under State of the City, Baltimore. Our Baltimore connection with Brother Darren Muhammad. He's a bad man out of Baltimore. So that's Saturdays on TuneIn Radio at 1590 AM. Glenn Burney out of Baltimore. That's Brother Darren Muhammad. Every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, Dr. Aleem, Your Immunity Project, comes on at 7 o'clock. And he has his program. If you put your information in the chat, I'll be able to send you the information so you can tune into this excellent program. And he also has a program called Fani Radio. Every Friday at 8 o'clock, African Echoes, Brother Trust Graham, and the crew out of Newark, New Jersey. They have one of the hottest study groups on the East Coast. And they're doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reformation of the African mind. That's Brother Trust, Danny, Brother True, and the people out of African Echoes. That's an excellent Saturday study group, Friday study group. And then on Saturday, the brothers out of Asbury Park, the Know Thyself study group, with Brother True and excellent. Brother Trust is also the mediator of that study group, and they're doing Chancellor Williams' classic, The Destruction of Black Civilization. And one thing about Brother Trust and the good brothers out there, when you think you know something about study, you will have to get a second opinion. Because Trust brings a whole new dynamic to studying and reading. So, please mute yourself, Brother Mikhail. Also, Dr. James McIntosh and the Simotep organization with Sister Richardine Theodore and Sister Betty Dobson. They have the Minefield program come on from 2 to 2:30 every Wednesday on WBAI. You tune in and Dr. McIntosh and them has the hottest program on WBAI, excellent information. And if you want to know everything that's going on with the Simotap organization, You can tune in to Simotap's website and they will give you that information. The Community Cop program with Brother Mike, Noel Lena, Julian Harper. Community Cop comes on every Tuesday at 5 o'clock on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And you can tune in to Facebook and type in Community Cop, and through all the years that they have been putting the information on, you can go back in and do your own study. And the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club, you can view all lectures that we have had on YouTube under BK William Mackey Jr. and go back into the lectures from Dr. Lewis, Mike Graves, Brother Chad, Sister Keisha, and do your own study. This way, if you don't believe them, you could go back and do your own study. So we have these informations in honor of the William Mackey Jr. History Club. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we have a brother that has been to Kemet, Egypt, numerous occasions. And he's been here before. He's one of the top historians on that area, Karnak. He has a bunch of publications here. Without further ado, he just got back, and the floor is his. I want you to give a great big hand to the great Dr. Fred Monderson. Thank you, camera.
Okay. No problem.
Good evening, family. It's wonderful to be back. Once I made an analogy to Reggie Jackson after he was traded by the Yankees to Oakland. And he said, Gene Autry was the right person to put you back in the saddle. So I'm so happy that Brother Ray Ray has put me back in the saddle, and I'm here to share some of my information with you.
All right.
I want to say, first of all, to give you a little bit of information about who I am, because I came to the United States from Guyana before my 19th birthday. I wanted to say that I didn't get on the boat last night, but I was in Brooklyn when Pharaoh Sanders played at the East, G2 Willis's home in 1968. So I've been around a little bit, and I earned my stripes. And I tried to walk the right path, but stay within my lane. I can always confess, I didn't accept any handouts, and nobody gave me any, so I remained independent. I worked with some of the great ones. I was in the army with Brother Brown in 1970. I met Dr. Ben in 72. And in fact, I gave Dr. Ben his name. I was one of the very first people to call him Dr. Ben, and it stuck. Because back in those days, when you was taking enemy fire, friendly fire, family fire, there were a few of us who stuck with it. Dr. Lewis and his wife, and Brother Bianchi out of Detroit. So we were the people who was rounding with Dr. Ben and Brother Professor Simmons. I come out of the Hunter College School of Dr. Clark and Marimba Ani, and what they taught me has been the fire that kept my furnace burning. Dr. Ben Johanan said to me when I was a very young man, he said, Monderson, there are 50 countries in Africa. Choose at that time. Choose one and become a specialist, not a generalist. So I chose Egypt. And I put all my money, my time, my inspiration, my effort into learning about this culture. He said again, when I went to Egypt with him in the middle 80s, he said, now that you have come to Egypt and seen what you have seen, what are you going to do with it? Then he said, publish or perish. So his admonition was to share the information with our people in preparing them for the journey. He once said, Monderson is long-winded, and he turned around and said, oh, he's prepared for the journey. And the third thing he said was, when you're doing research on ancient Egypt, get the oldest material you can find and work from there. Brothers and sisters, I submit to you that this is the foundation in Egyptology. From 1890 to 1940. Now, this comes after all of this. So I got my work cut out to get this to you in addition to the issues of my topic. My topic tonight is the king of Egypt, the king in dynastic Egypt. Now, I'm so impressed with Brother Ray informing you about the sources of information that is so essential for your survival in this mind world that we're mind field, mind world, mind games that we're involved in. So I wrote this book called Where Are the Kamite Kings, which is a history of Egypt, focusing on the names where kings have left evidence of their existence. So it's a history of Egypt. It's a bit different what my topic is today because I'm focusing on the individual institution and the person who is in charge of it, so to speak. I was recently contacted by some people out of Detroit that the great Zahi Hawass is going to Detroit to speak. He is the guy who said that Egypt is not African. The Egyptians were not Africans. Now, he's a big one because he was the supreme chairman of the Supreme Council in Egypt. So he knew what he was saying. However distorted he wants to project the evidence. So these brothers agreed that they're going to go where he's speaking and protest. Well, he's going to be in the middle, you outside. What you got is a poster or whatever. You need ammunition. You need who are the ancient Egyptians? When you wave this at him like that, he got to answer this. Okay, because this I published this last year. I'm not saying that this is the definitive work, but it is my take on who these Africans were. So this is recent, it's updated, and it's got a lot of information. Let me say this, without water in my mouth. You people are not buying my books. That's on you. I bought every book that Dr. Ben wrote because I was with Ben, Professor Simmons, and we as young people, young revolutionaries, and Dr. Ben was producing these works, so we would buy the books to give them a chance to produce another book. Of course, Dr. Ben introduced self-publishing, so he did his own fumbling alchemical land or what have you. Celebrating Dr. Ben tells you about every book that he wrote. The cover and overleaf is in this book, and perhaps one or two he did not autograph to me. So it shows that our connection. And in fact, if you open it, you will see that he actually signed off on the book because I took it to him in nursing home before I published it. He approved of it, celebrating Dr. Ben, and then he signed it. He signed his name to it. So, and then I wrote 2 others in support of it, which I call the Ben Trilogy. Black Extravaganza and the third book is called Let's Liberate the Temple. Now, in addition to who were the ancient Egyptians, Dr. Ben was a master of Karnak Temple. Professor Simmons was Abdul. So I wrote this book called The Temple of Karnak. It is a guidebook to the temple itself. In discussion one day I don't want to call it confrontation, but I have a meeting with the director, and I had to tell him, I said, sir, I know more about this temple than you, because I've been over this temple 10 times, or 11, 12 times. I photographed every inch of it, all of the stones and everything. So these are the things that you need in order to confront Zahi Hawass. I work with Gita Weusi, Sonny Carson, Bill Lynch, Elam Lebrat, David Dinkins. When in 2000 Mike Tyson was arrested, somebody said somebody need to write that guy and teach him some history. So I wrote a book called 10 Poems Praising Great Blacks for Mike Tyson. And then I told myself, he said, no. Continue. So I wrote him 7 letters on Egyptian temples. It had nothing to do with his life or anything else. I just said, listen, hey brother, you could be in there for a long time. Start reading black history. So I picked up all the major temples in Egypt and I wrote to him about it. And then he was out of prison in 3 months, but I had written so much information to him that I was able to publish this 576-page book. I mean, I learned about the significance of the letter. So even when O.J. Simpson in 94 was arrested, right, I wrote him 19 letters, about 8,000 pages. And on the day of the Million Mile March, October 16, 1995, I took 17 volumes to the Library of Congress. We were on Dr. Bach's bus. There was a brother named Sid. I never met him again. He had lost this much of his arm. And when we got after we walked from RFK Stadium to the Capitol building, and I said I was going into the Library of Congress, Sid picked up one of the bags, and he said, I want to make history 2 times today. And that book was called 19 Letters to O.J. Simpson on Ancient Egyptian Temples. Now, if you're into Hatshepsut's Temple of Deir el-Bahari, well, this is a guidebook to the temple. Okay, so you're a nationalist and all that. How about black nationalism, alive and well? And black nationalism, still alive and well. So I'm trying to do like what Reve is doing over there, right? Anyway, so let me look at why I'm here this evening. I'm here to speak to the king in dynastic Egypt. This is an important part of ancient African history. The great ones, Dr. Diop, Dr. Obenga, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Asa Hillard, several other people. Even Malon Karenga and Asante and all of them, they've made some contributions. The most significant was Dr. Diop. I was in Detroit last year with Dr. Jeffries, and we were kicking it one Friday evening. This guy named Randy, the brother named Randy, was with us in the hotel, and Dr. J said, we have to thank Dr. Diop. And I said, what for? He said, Diop gave us Egypt.
Yes, sir.
Diop gave us Egypt, but what are we doing to hold on to it? So much so that this guy, Zahi Hawass, can come to Detroit. Detroit is Malcolm City. Remember Malcolm said, whatever the man said, you better look into it. So he's going to come there and speak. And the brothers need the ammunition, intellectual ammunition, of course, in order to confront him and show him the proper path. So, the king in dynastic Egypt. In many discussions, the question arises as to where and when the notion of kingship arose and what were the motivating principles of this phenomenon that has played such a significant role in statecraft and nation building from ancient to modern times. Even more, whether the origin is mortal or divine, the impact of civilization's progress has been unquestioned. Nevertheless, thanks to the University of Chicago's Bruce Williams' important crystal discovery, the question seems settled. The notion and actuality of kingship is African in origin, or more appropriately, it is Nubian. From the discovery of crystal, Mr. Williams has been able to trace the date the world's earliest monarchy at about 3400 BC. He showed that the paraphernalia of kingship found more than 200 years later in Egypt, that is to say, an enthroned pharaoh wearing the white crown with a whip and flail, the symbols of kingly authority. A seret, that is to say, the falcon on the facade of a palace. An incense burner. Incense was important because incense chased away evil spirits. Nile boats, cows, and other features. It was first evident in Nubia at least 200 years before we see it arriving in Egypt. Such an occurrence confirms Dr. Clarke's theory of the rehearsal stage for civilization. That is to say, like a theater play, it has to be rehearsed somewhere before it is put on stage for the audience. Therefore, the implications and manifestations of concomitant theology, cosmology, monarchy, religion, and spirituality are clearly African. For this is where God first approached man in showing his unbounded love for humanity in a contract or covenant simply requiring recognition, worship, and ritual. Albert Churchward explained that this ritual, or what I call sweet communion with deity, has been ongoing for 300,000 years. Not yesterday, 300,000. In this compact, the God conferred a tremendous responsibility on the conscience of this African man with the admonition to advance the cause of humanity within the construct of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. You can tell that to Zaki Hawass. Because this is what Dr. J was referring to. But Dr. Diop, Dr. Benga, Dr. Leonard James, Dr. Ben, Asa Hiller, Van Sertima, Karenga, Asante, and several others. And the inspiration and the spirituality that emanates from this holy site that we are located in this evening. Equally, when I raised the issue, so this Dr. Hawass, as I said, he was the chairman of the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt under Mubarak, and with the fall of Mubarak, he was removed. However, when I raised the issue of Napta Playa in the western desert of Upper Egypt with Mr. Mansour, I had to thank him for he got me into the Temple of Mut, which is closed. I was in there, I did my thing, I got my evidence. He said that they were Caucasians. However, Bavar and Brophy wrote Black Genesis in 2011. And they called these black Africans the precursors to the pharaohs. That is to say, those people of the Western Desert laid the foundation for what would later become ancient Egypt. Equally, Toby Wilkinson in Genesis of the Pharaohs of 2003 informed that civilization was born in the harsh realities of the desert, Then it migrated to the Nile Valley. So civilization was not born in the valley of the Nile, but in African man's attempt to conquer his environment, he developed all forms of scientific approaches to human survival. He explained that he found in the eastern desert petroglyphs, that is writing on the caves, the walls of not necessarily caves, but in that harsh environment, those areas where humans sought to shelter from the rays of the sun, they also engage in art, forms of art, and they left evidence that we begin to see these things appearing as motifs and protocols of Egyptian culture.
Right.
So they depict much of the cultural drama. Henry Winkler, a German in Egypt, Upper Egypt in 1937 and again in 1930, read 2 books, and he said that these were Mesopotamians who settled there. What Toby Wilkinson said that these images were at least 1,000 years before Winkler. We have to understand that, I was in Egypt in August of this year, and I met this young Frenchman at Edfu Temple, and he said to me, he said he was studying the hieroglyphs, and he said that there was racism in the foundation of Egyptology, because these people believed that this great work could not have been done by African people. So it must have been us, but not him, but our people, right? So they were using the if-then proposition, right? George Foucault was a French Egyptologist in the beginning, at the end of the 19th century. He said that the early Egyptologists made mistakes. Dr. Lennon James said those mistakes were purposeful. So they know what they were doing when they were stacking the deck against us. Right. So Zahi Hawass is just continuing that false information trail. That the sad thing is that the Europeans began it and the Egyptians now take it over. Michael writes in what we call Egypt's Making, the origins of ancient Egypt from 5000 to 2000 BC, makes an interesting observation regarding kingship in Egypt. He says the early Egyptian had a genius never remotely approached by any other ancient society for devising symbols which instantly encapsulate complex and diverse concepts. The Egyptians indeed are the supreme symbolists. Every aspect of their society, whether art, religion, and the life which revolved around the king, reflects this strain of very individual quality. Kingship was the ultimate Egyptian institution. The king represents the absolute focus of all Egyptian history. His kingship was personified in what is surely one of the most inspiring images in the entire course of symbolism. As a golden hawk soaring limitless high above the world. We must remember now, this whole notion, anything above, Dr. Ben got a lot of mileage by praising Queen Hatshepsut for her temple, which was 3 stories high, when the norm was 1 story. So anything above, let's say, 40 or 50 feet was unique to the early mind evolving in this part of Africa. So the symbol of the hawk or the falcon was divine.
Right.
So the king represents the apple. His kingship is personified in what is surely one of the most inspired images in the entire course of symbolism. As a golden hawk soaring limitless high above the world, a creature of the sun, infinitely removed, one of those whose natural habitat is the empyrean, in the exalted firmament where his home, other than in the fortunate land of Egypt lay beyond the perishable stars. Not even the majestic bull or the majestic lion or the dominant bull, though they were both creatures associated with the kingship in early times, quite achieved the breathtaking vision of the falcon of gold as the ultimate icon in which the concept of kingship was so perfectly enshrined. So, in this cultural evolution and establishment of pharaonic kingship, philosophical transformation of the individual who wished to be king is of importance. In this respect, Georges Foucault, I mentioned his name before, he noted in an article called The Egyptian King in 1905, he said that the true pharaoh does not exist, theologically speaking, until he is received at Heliopolis in the north. There's a whole story about that. Amuletu said it was the Africans who founded Heliopolis and initiated the worship of the god Ra, and Ra is supposed to have been the earliest creator god. The true pharaoh does not exist, theologically speaking, until he is received at Heliopolis all the magical religious consecrations which transform him into a living incarnation of Ra, the sun god, creator of the world. So this human sat on the throne, they did their magic spiritually and otherwise, and he became God. He was imbued once they put the crown on his head. He was imbued with unimaginable intellect, unimaginable prescience, unimaginable power. So it was a transformation. Now you gotta understand now, it's not for you to believe. You can learn. This is what they believe. As they were writing on a tabula rasa, which is an empty slate, there was nothing there. So they started everything, and this is how they viewed the world in their time. Right. So you come now and you say, well, what you can do is try to learn from what they did, because they were the foundation of all forms of knowledge. Medicine, architecture, art, economics, navigation, you name it. These were African people. The elaborate, so he tells you where you're going to find the earliest accumulation of knowledge regarding this magical transformation. Van Sertima, I took a measurement of time in a cycle of 360 days.
Right.
And then they realized, well, because of natural phenomenon in their environment, they realized 360 days for the year was too short. So they in essence, added 5 days. They call it the epogymal days, the days of the birth of the 5 gods, Osiris and Isis, Set and Nephthys, and Horus. So they moved from 360 days for the year to 365 days. But they realized that even 365 days was a bit short.
Right.
So Dr. Diab said that they waited through a Celtic cycle of 1460 days because the year slipped back a quarter of a day every year. Right. And then they added a whole year. When Julius Caesar went into Egypt in 30 BC, he found he introduced the whole notion of the leap year, so that every 4 years we add another day. I mean, next year, February will have 29 days. This year, 23, February only had 28 days next year. So he added a quarter of a day every 4 years, and therefore we get to it. So now, all of this here, if you remember in the beginning, I mentioned a 3200, which I called Nile year 840. So what I did was I constructed a calendar from 4240 BC, so that 3200 was 840 years. So all of that brought us all the way up to today. I can't remember, we're like in 6,000, however, years, in 1582, so Julius Caesar introduced the Julian calendar in 30 BC into Europe, and in 1582, Pope Gregory changed that to the Gregorian calendar. So we really don't know what year we're in. We just moving along. But now, the Egyptians even realized that there is what is called the stellar year, the solar year, the agricultural year. There was the only society that uses 4 calendars, right? There is the religious calendar, there's the farmer's calendar, there's the European calendar, and then there's the calendar based on the Nile overflowing. The lunar calendar is a short year of 354 days. That is why today we are in what is called the Muslim Ramadan season. Now, the Prophet Muhammad prohibited his people from adding to the Muslim year of 354 days. So that if today we are celebrating the Muslim calendar year in April, then in 6 years' time, it will be celebrated in October. Theirs is a 54-day calendar. So that's how we get the myth of Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys, and Horus. And then, of course, the judgment, the myth of the judgment, and the belief in the afterlife, that if you live well, you could live another life after death. I mean, I've written about Medvedeva's life after death. Dr. Felder loved it because I was writing down Bedford Avenue past the college, and I got an inspiration. But there is life after, if you believe that. The so-called religious crises. During the Archaic period, religious conflict developed between the early kings. During the 18th dynasty, the religious revolution of Amenhotep IV of Akhenaten is another such case. Some scholars mischaracterize this movement, saying it was heresy, but the notion of heresy came later in the Christian period. It was a religious revolution. It's like the donation of Constantine. It was a forgery. Why? Because language used in the donation of Constantine wasn't invented as yet. It's like we are in 1920 and we're talking, and then you say, we have this document that has a line that says, "Where's the beef?" Well, "Where's the beef" wasn't invented in 1920. So that document had to be created at a much later time. Right. And this is what the donation of Constantine is. It's like I said, it's like calling Thutmose III the Napoleon of far antiquity. I mean, you didn't say that Napoleon is the Thutmose of his age, or say Samori Touré, he's the Black Napoleon of the Sudan. The dynastic chronology, which I'll get into right now. Today, this is a movable target as scholars continue to seek to reduce it. The various periods, there is a pre-dynastic period from 4200 BC, consisting of a trilogy of cultures of Badarian, Amratian, and Gorsian. These last two are categorized as Naquata 1 and 2. These and so much more was located in Upper Egypt, and I mentioned Moret and Dr. Diop response. Okay, so we have the Archaic period, which is dynasties 1 and 2. The Old Kingdom, dynasties 3 and 6. The First Intermediate period, dynasties 7 and 10. The Middle Kingdom, 11 through 14. The Second Intermediate period, 15 through 17. The New Kingdom, dynasties 17 and 18 to dynasty 22. And the late period of the 25th dynasty, the Ethiopian kings. The picture writing, hieroglyphic, hieratic, and demotic. Middle Egyptian seems to be the most prominent form. The term Egyptology has been somewhat confusing, but Sir Flinders Petrie defined Egyptology as knowledge of history, geography, and literature, essentially the writing. So when some of the false prophets accused, like they said, Dr. Ben don't know how to read the hieroglyphic. You don't need to read that. It's all here. Okay? I used to, when I was starting out, I used to teach it to the primary school students. I got so distracted as a historian, but there's so much that's been translated, you don't need it. There's specialists who do that. They do that and bring it to me, and then I do what I have to do. The teaching of the monuments. This is what you see when you visit Egypt. Keep in mind, Dr. Ben Johanan instructed students regarding the great Hypostyle Hall in Karnak Temple. You must visit 5 or 6 times before you can begin to comprehend what you're seeing. So, like, remember I said about the double backflip? You look at the stuff that blow your mind. The charlatans who carry you over there say it's hot. We need to get back to the hotel where it's nice and cool. But we'll do a little shopping later on. So, and then Dr. J said, when Mandela passed, Bob Law had a thing at Kaji, the Church of God in Brooklyn. Mandela said, Dr. J said that, okay, Dr. Clark criticized Minister Louis Farrakhan. Yeah, see, he quoted the Bible more often than he quotes Quran. Dr. J criticized Mugabe. He said when the Chinese go to Zimbabwe, they come and their people got all the documents already laid out. They said just sign here. When Mugabe and his people go to China and they come back, they hold the bags, they've been shopping. They're not really thinking. And a lot of our people go to Egypt, come back, shopping. Dr. Ben said you buy gold in Cairo, leather in Luxor, cotton in Aswan, but in terms of true knowledge of the subject, you're not getting the books. Who were the ancient Egyptians? Okay? Where are the Karnak kings? Temple of God. Many manifestations of the king of Egypt. So the king was a god. In comparable parlance, the king ruled for the god. In ancient Egypt, he was a god. He was the son of God. He was simultaneously divine and mortal. So he was man, he was God and man. He was chief priest. Only he could conduct the ritual and praise of his God. As he could not be in every temple, he deputized a chief priest to act in his stead, who would say, I do this in the name of the king. However, when the king visited a specific day, the chief priest became his assistant. He was a temple builder. He built temples to his God, or worship temples, and to himself, mortuary temples. He called it his mansions of millions of years. He was supposed to be worshipped in these temples after he had passed on. But some powerful kings were worshipped while they were still alive, especially in the Ramesside period. He was a patron of the arts. His workshop not only made palace utensils, statues, etc., but at times he would commission work for favorite officials. As a model in art, he's always shown as physically fit, until the time of Akhenaten, who represented himself with a belly and flabby skin. He said, I'm getting older, so like me, I'm losing my... Well, there is snow on the roof, but the boiler works, so rest assured. He was a defender of Egypt. The king fought against Egypt's enemies, domestic and foreign, spiritual and actual. By manifesting might or goodness, the king conquered Isfet or evil, dark spiritual forces seeking to create havoc on society. So through prayer, ritual, and incense, evil was banished. Prayers and ritual addressed to the great gods are said in the king's name. I do this in the name of the king, even if you were the priest. You don't do it in your name. Often seen with an incense in his hand. He is often seen incensing the bark of the gods that was being hoisted in or outside of the temple. In the sanctuary, the chief priest incensed the room while the king conducted the ritual. One of the early instruments found at Crystal of the kingdom of Taseti was an incenser. Now we see the king holding it, then he puts the incense in it. Now in the sanctuary itself, you don't burn incense on the altar. You put it in a little container on the side over there, and then do what you got to do. But otherwise, there's a hand incense. I saw one in when I was in Paris with my daughter at the Louvre. They have it on display. The king was fearing and he was worshiping at the same time. He was the chief ceremonial official. He opens the dams and the dikes. He blesses agricultural beginnings. He dedicates statues to the Nile. He was the chief initiator of various festivals. He led the procession outside and inside the temple. He leads or initiates the daily ritual. As high priest, he participates in great religious festivals, in foundation laying and religious festivals, administration of his empire, resources. He reads and disposes of a great number of official documents on a daily basis. When his day begins, after he's done his toilet and whatever, have his breakfast, as we would call it, and he puts on all of his paraphernalia. Then the officials bring in all the documents. He's a literary genius. Okay, he has to check everything. All right. If we see dignitaries who reported the condition of the harvest, the amount of tax revenue, height of the inundation, and much more. He tours the land to inspect ongoing projects, and as chief military leader, commander-in-chief, he recruits and maintains his military force in a state of readiness. Of course, he has to be baptized or cleansed before he could enter the temple every day. Approaching the king. There is a pattern of behavior in approaching the king. Generally, people have to kiss the ground before him. Some fortunate individuals are allowed to kiss the king's feet. Individuals do not speak to the king. You speak in the king's presence. You do not look directly at the king. Yet certain individuals, the very highest officials, are exempt from these strictures. Those who wash, dress, and feed the king are protected from the awfulness of being in his presence. It's like, the sun, the magnificence of the sun that radiates. If you get too close, you get burned. Right. So there was a form of behavior within that realm. Just like the sun god, the king had his back attendants who also dressed him. That's another. We'll talk about that next time. Those people in close association with him are protected from the awfulness of his presence. Now, very few people will tell you this. Locating the king. An illustration of Ramses III's mortuary temple at Medinet Habu depicts the king leaving his palace to enter the temple. Every mortuary temple of Thebes had an adjacent palace somewhere near the entrance. These were palaces at the mortuary. There were palaces at the mortuary or king's temple, but none at the god or worship temple. Second, Seti's temple at Abydos shows the king hand opening the door to the sanctuary. My guide, been I know him for 30-some years. We've been going to Egypt. And he was so flabbergasted when I showed him an image of Seti opening the door to the sanctuary. In fact, I asked him to take me. He was my guide and my protector. But things that I would know and point out to him, I took him to Beni Hassan. Right? With my son, I have a son who's a karate expert. Where my son was flabbergasted to see martial arts practice in the Middle Kingdom. And I met an individual at Summertech who would ask me if I knew about the name of this particular king, martial arts instructor, who was from the time of Norman. So if you had a military, you had to train him. So this notion of martial arts is not Japanese. It's African. Okay. And then a Karnak temple. Karnak temple of Nara, there is an image of the king leaving the temple. Now, leaving the sanctuary. Now, you don't turn your back on God. You back. And there is a tree, a branch, that you see the environment, the floor of the sanctuary was generally of sand. So you had to remove your footprints. So you use this it's called hidden, H-I-D-N, tree, branch. And as you back it away, you do it like that. And you leave everything, you back away, you close the door, and then you seal it until the next time. So those three instances, the king going to the temple, the king opening the sanctuary, and the king leaving the sanctuary, that is a special gift to you today. So, two nesses of the king. Two. So, there are two types of names. There is the mythical name, which is the Horus name and the Horus of Gold name. And the royal names. The two ladies, the Sutenbat and the son of Ra. I'll explain these two. There are two types of images that are prominent throughout. The white crown. The white crown represents the 7-month infant in the mom's womb. The red crown represents the 9-month embryo. Well, if you remember, the white crown rests on the red crown for the double crown. Right? The second thing, there were two types of images, so the mythical names are one, the two types of images are two. 3 is the vulture and the serpent that's on the brow of the king or on the crown. These are called the two ladies. Is also one of the his titles. The images are generally seen on two baskets with the vulture bird's tail resting on the basket. They're together. The basket of the serpent or the Urias, signaling unity of these two. While the king had 5 names, his prenomen, Praenomen, and nomen, Nomen. Those are his birth and his throne names. These are the ones that are in the cartouche. The birth name is the prenomen, and the throne name is the nomen. There were 2 kingdoms, upper and lower, were represented respectively by the white and the red crown. The white crown always takes precedence over the red crown. It is, as I said earlier, it's not a red and white crown, but a white crown resting on the red crown, which is to show you. If we say a red and white crown, then we give it the more prominence over the south, which is the king is always king of Upper and Lower Egypt. So, know that. We have to demystify the falsity that they have been ingrained in our understanding of this culture. In the earliest time, the king appointed 2 viziers, one for Upper Egypt and one for Lower Egypt. However, by the time of the new kingdom, the power then resided on a single vizier, and he had assistants. And the single vizier was in the north, in the south, in Upper Egypt. All this notwithstanding, the crowns of Egypt were the embodiment of power. There were generally 5 principal crowns. So we talk about the white crown, the red crown, the double crown, the blue crown, and the name's headdress, each for a specific purpose or region. In fact, there were actually 23 crowns listed at the temple of Hathor at Denver. Each is on the eastern and western outer face of the temple, and another on the column on entering the praenos, or the entrance hall. The crowns of Egypt included the red crown of the lower kingdom, representing its capital, traditional capital at Behedat, near in the north. Its heraldic plant was the papyrus, so the papyrus represented the north. On the other hand, the white crown represented the upper kingdom with the royal residence at Ambos near modern Naquara. It is generally thought the heraldic plant was the lotus. So the lotus represented the south, the papyrus represented the north. At unification, the white and red crowns were united in a white resting on red. I have to reintegrate it. White resting on red, double crown. Not red and white, double crown. we got to understand too that the orientation, right? They're telling north, south, east, and west. It's not north, south, east, and west. It's south, north, east, and west. Why? Because in that early time, the ancients oriented themselves through river traffic, and the Egyptians oriented themselves with the flow of the river from south to north. The Europeans oriented themselves from north to south in the flow of the Tigris-Euphrates. So they projected that to us, and unless we could demystify what they're telling us, we are fighting their battle as opposed to ours. He was the uniter of the two lands. He wore the blue crown as a cap or leather, which he wore in battle. And then the Neem's headdress is a kind of a claw thing when he didn't want too much weight on his head. Let's not forget he wore a lion's tail, symbolic of the animal's power. You see, in the 19th century, when Europeans began to penetrate Africa, they encountered a kingdom, small kingdom, that was ruled by a woman. And she had the symbolic lion's tail. So the guy went back home and wrote, said, you know, in Africa, the black women have tails. Of course, he didn't understand what the symbol is. It's like when many of these visitors first encountered a people. So I'd like to speak to the king. So this guy jumped up and said, yeah, well, how can I help you? Okay. Then when they feel him out and he comes back again, someone speak to the king. That's the king. He said, well, we didn't know who you were, so we made sure you speak with this guy before you could really meet with the real deal, you know. So E. Jefferson Murphy in Civilizations of Africa wrote regarding the personal paraphernalia of the Pharaoh. He says, we think of African witch doctors with fantastic, colorful costumes. Look again at a former portrait of a Pharaoh. Note that he wears an enormous headdress. From his double crown sprouts the head of a vulture and the fire-spitting flame head of a female hooded cobra, supposedly capable of consuming rebels in flames. The Pharaoh was the son of the falcon god and was considered a falcon himself, endowed with magical powers and an all-seeing eye. From his waist hangs an animal tail. On his shaven chin he wears a false beard, which is itself considered a god. In his hand he carries a scepter with the head of the god set atop it, recognizable in curious snout, long straight curved snout, long straight ears, and shaped almond eyes. Adding more to the fanfare books demonstrate further. In processions, banners are carried before the king. These banners bear the symbols of the many powerful brother gods who have blessed him and whose aid is his to command. It's like in Christianity, the Pope, from Jesus onwards through all the saints, they have done so many good works. It's like it's kept symbolically in a chest, and he has the right and the power to delve into that to gain some of the power to do what he has to do. These banners bear the symbols of many powerful brother gods who have blessed him and whose aid is his to command. Of course, pharaohs also wore jewels of armband, a necklace, rings, a girdle of apron with Uriah, sandals who carried a dagger, a flail, an iron mace, or he carried a bow and arrows with which to slay his enemies. Who was a god and superhuman on the battlefield, could slay hundreds of enemies at a stroke all by himself. His eyes scrutinize the depths of every being. Nothing is impossible for him. Everything which he ordains comes about. The 5 names of the king. So the king had 5 names. Actually, there were 9 names, but the 5 are the principal names. So we have the Horus name, which is, he represents, he succeeded Osiris. So Ra was the first king of Egypt, and his son was Osiris. And Osiris was killed by his brother. And the two, when Horus was impregnated, Isis was impregnated at Abydos, and she got a son, and he was protected, and he grew to manhood, and he challenged his uncle for rulership of Egypt. And the trial was held in the tribunal in the heavens. Thoth was represented as his lawyer, and then his Osiris' father Gem said, "Listen, let's have peace. I'm going to divide the country into two. I'm going to give Osiris, I'm going to give Horus the north, I'm going to give Set the south." And then Set proved trickery, so he took it away from him and gave the entire country to Horus. So he became the successor to his father, so he had a Horus title, okay, which symbolized the falcon that I mentioned soared into the heavens. He had a two ladies temple title, which is the cobra and the serpent, oftentimes seen on the brow of his crown or his forehead. The Horus of gold. The king's body was supposedly of divine substance that is represented as gold. So Horus of gold was one of his things. The Sutenbat, that is to say, as king of Upper and Lower Egypt, that was his fourth title. And if you remember a few minutes ago, I said that that was his praenom, Praenomen, and his son of Ra name, his nomen. So those two, the last two, praenom, Sutenbat, and the son of Ra, those are the names that were in the cartouche. But he also had other names. He was called Good God, the Double Palace, the Sublime Gate, the Royal Dwelling. It's like you would say the White House, but when you say the White House, you know you mean the president. Right? Therefore, in that divine demigod, human coming of age, the king of Egypt came to inherit many hats throughout his lifetime. He was prince, pharaoh, and he was God. We know his protocols would later include the 5 names, which I just mentioned, which is the Horus, the golden Horus, the Sutenbat, the 2 ladies, and the son of Ra. Yet Dr. Ben Johanan attributed 9 names to the king. The customary find, but also when the king functions as high priest. When he's in the temple worshiping, he has a different name. When he was celebrating certain festivals, 2 of the most important was the Feast of the Valley and the Opet Festival. And now he was the perfect God. Of course, he's still the father of the nation. There were others. In all, the name Pharaoh, signifying the great house as we know it, to signify as we use the present, is not found before the new kingdom. So that came about just like the Neem's headdress is a new kingdom invention. So you had the white, red, double, the blue crown, but the new kingdom introduced the Neem's headdress and the name Pharaoh. Now, much of this was because of Hatshepsut. This woman was a genius. Okay, a lot of the things that she initiated, introduced, became standard practice. But they didn't like her because she was a woman who said, "I'm the son of God." Come on, how could you? She was maligned, but her father, Thutmose I, realized that he needed somebody. His other son was weak. He needed somebody strong to succeed him. And he told her, he said, "Listen, form alliances with strong men in the kingdom, and they will protect you." So this guy, Setmut, who was an architect that did all her work, he had a political party. So he got these some Nubians, Egyptians, or whatever, and they kept her in power until the opposition to Moses, with conniving with the priests, they orchestrated a scene in which the God stopped, was in procession, and he stopped and said, listen, you will be the next king. But it was all concocted. Yeah. Okay. So, which this will come out in the coronation, but once the king is coronated, he has to establish what's called the protocols. That is to say, how you can address him, whether it's the locals or foreigners or whatever. So, as an example, Tutmosis III, who his Horus name was Mighty Bull, appearing in Thebes. His two ladies' name was Enduring of Kingship. His Horus of gold name was Splendid of Diadems. The king of Upper and Lower Egypt was Enduring of Form of Ra. And the two ladies' name was he's called Menkep Ra, and his son of Ra name was Tutmosis. Of all these names, the last one alone was the original one, which was given to the king at birth, by which he was known before the beginning of his reign. The other four were all adopted upon his accession to the throne and were often amplified by the addition of supplementary epithets in the course of his reign. Scholar of the 19th century, Legge, quotes Brudge, and Ehrman. He talks about Tutmosis first, Hatshepsut's father, also Tutmosis' second and third father. So he sent out what's called a prescript to notify the land how I'm going to be addressed in future. So the letter from the king to let you know that my majesty, life, health, strength, has become king of the south and north on the throne of the living Horus, peerless and eternal. My majesty has been decreed to this. The Horus name, Mighty Bull, beloved of God, Lord of Diadems, who rises like a flame, the great twice strong one, Horus of gold, beautiful of years, who makes hearts to live, King of the south and north, fair incarnation of the double Ra, Kepa, Ra, Re. And the son of Ra was Tutmosis, living forever. And as I mentioned earlier, that the protocols and much of the features of kingship were in existence from the beginning, even to the time of the Ptolemies, which is the Greeks, right? So Ptolemy V Epiphanes, his Horus Ra name was the youth who has risen as a king on the throne of his father. His Lord of Diadems, great twice strong one, making form the two lands, beautifier of Egypt, beneficent of heart towards the God. His Horus of gold, giver of life to men, Lord of the set festivals like Ptah, prince like Ra, king of the south and north, heir of the Father, heir, H-E-I-R, of the Father, loving gods, chosen of Ptah, strength of the double of Ra, living power of Amen. His son of Ra, Ptolemy, living forever, beloved of Ptah. This shows the protocol essentially remained unchanged throughout dynastic rule. Again, Tutankhamun, which we are familiar with, his Horus Ra, Mighty Bull, living image of those who are born, Lord of Diadems, good of laws, who makes the two lands content. Horus of gold, renewer of risings, who pleases the gods. King of the south and north, a lord of the incarnation of Ra, Neb Keperu Ra. son of Ra, Tutankhamun, prince of Heliopolis. Note two things. First, Thutmose I is simply Horus. Tutankhamun is Horus Ra, and this continued even with Ptolemy. Second, Tutankhamun was significant for coming after the Amarna revolution. And I mentioned it, Amenhotep IV with the religious revolution. They called it a heresy, and Tobenga said, no, it's not a heresy, it's a revolution. Heresy came in after with the Christian. He restored, after the Amarna revolution, there was Smenkhare, and then Tutankhamun. Amenhotep IV had moved and created a new city called Amarna. He left Thebes because he thought that the gods of Thebes were difficult to deal with. So when he died, I followed in as Smenkhare and then Tutankhamun. So Tutankhamun went back to Thebes, went back to Karnak, and he issued the restoration decree. So his father's god was the Aten. His name was called initially Tutankhaten, A-T-E-N. And when he went back to Karnak, he changed his name. When he issued the restoration decree, he changed his name to Tutankhamun. Professor Clark often said that Tutankhamun was a minor king who got a major funeral. And we know that from the jewelry that he was buried with him, right? This is underscored in the wealth buried with him. One could well imagine the wealth of Thutmose III and Seti I and the son Ramses II. They took to the grave that were robbed very early after their king. Nevertheless, in official intercourse and in letters addressed to him by foreign rulers, the king was addressed by the great name which he bore as king of Upper and Lower Egypt. That is his Sutenbach name, his prenomen. In daily life, there was a tendency to avoid mention of the king by name. Instead, he was referred to by various titles or circumlocutions such as His Majesty said that, or the good God said this, or one commanded, and the king commanded. The Rastaman would say, him said. What he meant is that his imperial majesty, him is imperial majesty, him say. But they never called Haile Selassie's name. Significantly more evidence of Egyptian kingship besides the... Okay, so we were able to identify Narmer as the beginning of dynastic rule by two artifacts that have survived. One is called the Narmer palette, where he is shown on both sides of this document, subduing the north, wearing the white crown and wearing the red crown. Right? There were also what are called kinglets carrying the name. So the surviving ones were at Abydos. The Abydos tablet is called kinglets. And then there was another one the temple at Abydos was built by Seti I of the 19th dynasty for the god Osiris. And right next to it was a temple for his son, Ramses II. There was a second list in Ramses' temple that was stolen by this guy named Pris de Amenes, and he took it to Paris. There was a Karnak, I'm sorry. The Abydos, the second Abydos list is in the British Museum. The Karnak tablet was stolen by Pris, and that is in Paris. Right? And then there is what is called the Saqqara tablet in the tomb of a nobleman named Tenroy, where there were 56 kings' names listed in his tomb. The Abydos tablet created by Seti I mentioned 76 kings from Narmer down to Seti. 75 to Ramses I. 76 was Seti I, his son. And Seti proclaim himself a god. And whereas what is called the triad, or father, husband, wife, and son, he is shown as Isis, Osiris, and Set, instead of Isis, Osiris, and Horus. There is a tomb called the Tomb of Monderson, where Tutmosis I, remember he started much of, so if we go back a bit, because I'm getting to that, you have Ames I married Ames Nefertari, the black goddess, and her son was Amenhotep I, and his son was Tutmosis I. And Tutmosis sired Hatshepsut, Tutmosis II, and Tutmosis III. Right? Tutmosis I is shown in the tomb of Amensu as purely black, just like the statues of Tutankhamun. And it's interesting because last year, National Geographic commissioned, National Geographic, I'm coming to closure here. National Geographic commissioned a statue, a bust of King Tut. And they got this guy out of Canada to make the bust. And he did it, they sent it back to Egypt, and then they covered it, and then they unfolded it. As lo and behold, the bust of Tutankhamun was made of plaster of Paris. What do you think that is?
Why?
They didn't paint him, right?
Why coloring?
So,
That happened when?
last year, around October. Anyway, let me take a break here and find out if there are any questions so far, because I have a little bit more, but I'm getting, because there's still a lot of interesting information I need to hurry through. All right, okay, let's see if we can do this. So, where did we get our information about the Egyptians? Well, Herodotus visited Egypt in 450 BC. Diodorus Siculus, Josephus, Sextus Africanus, Eusebio, George the Monk, and so forth. The king was also a warrior pharaoh. One of the principal functions of the king was to defend Egypt from internal and external enemies. The unifiers, we have Medes or Nama, who organized an armada and sailed from Abydos, though the offset is from Thebes. He conquered the north and unified the land, initiating the dynastic period geographically. Up Egypt extended from Elephantine at the top of the delta, where Memphis is located, all the way into where the cataracts are. We have Mentuhotep, and then we come to Pianki, 25th dynasty. Wars against an external enemy. So the Middle Kingdom, Usurtan II left the stela and beyond the southern borders of Egypt, saying, "We have come to overthrow Wawat." Wawat was the name of the state in Nubia. The Battle of Megiddo. Megiddo was 18th dynasty, Tutmosis III. He won a significant victory because of his daring, and then he conducted 17 other campaigns in Asia and subdued all of Asia, where Dr. Diop says that the kings come and kiss the ground at his feet. The wars of Setuan, the Battle of Kadesh, the battles against the sea people, Pianke, Taharka was from Nubia, the son of Pianke. He, at 21 years old, he was put in charge of both the Ethiopian and the Egyptian forces. He fought against the Syrians. I do want to talk about Ra, Nut, Geb, Osiris, and Amun, but Rere, if there are any questions, I will take them because I'm practically at the end of my presentation. So the parents of the king, which I wanted to mention, were Ra, Nut, Geb, Osiris, Amun, Hathor, and Canaan. Canaan made man on his potter's wheel, and he had two temples, one in Isis and one in Esna. And then the one goddesses who claimed that he was he opened my womb. He was my son, my firstborn. And then he was an athlete. His arms were mighty. He had the power and process of a god, prowess of a god. He was a good shepherd. And he was the intermediary between the people and the gods. And of course, he was invincible. So in essence then, I try to cover most of my bases there. What I'd like to do is summarize what I've said to you. One, that the king of Egypt was an institution that individuals came and occupied the throne after a magical ceremonial experience that transformed them from human into divine and mortal. They were able to transcend heaven, earth, and the underworld. For the most part, the good kings built temples, were buried with great fanfare, promoted wisdom, knowledge, science. And I am an Ethiopian scholar, and Dr. Diab, like Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and so many others, Professor Simmons, George Simmons, have insisted that the Egyptians were African people, black Africans. The fact of the matter is that a lot of the information that pertains to the ethnicity of the Egyptians were destroyed, much of it in modern times. Okay? And I like to draw attention to the fact that in some of the most far out of the way places, if you see evidence of images in the African mole, they're disfigured. But you go to Kamongo temple during the Greek period, and you go to Isis temple during the Greek period, they are images that are up front, but they have they're made in the European mold that are not even touched. Okay? So the fact of the matter is that when we contend with the likes of Zahi Hawass, we need information to push back against what he's saying and what so many others are saying. And my brothers and sisters, I want to thank you for your attention.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, give Dr. Monderson a great big hand. With all the information he spoke about Egypt and Kemet and all the books from our Zoom audience, is there any questions that you want to ask Dr. Monderson? Any questions from the Zoom audience first? Going once, going twice, 3 times, and that's it. Now we're going to go to the floor. Anybody from the floor has a question for Dr. Monderson?
Yes.
The 5 crowns was the white crown, the red crown, the double
The
crown.
principal crown. There were 23 crowns, but the principal crowns, the white crown, the red crown, the double crown, the blue crown, and the Nemes headdress, N-E-M-E-S, Nemes headdress. So that was like a cloth.
Spell again?
N-E-M-E-S, Nemes. So you didn't really want to have the weight of the crowns. You know, the crowns were symbolic. I mean, the blue crown was a light crown made of leather. When he went to war, he wore the blue crown. It's called the war crown. Or the Nemes headdresses, when he's relaxing. For ceremonial purposes, he would wear the more
Regal.
the greater crowns, which, you know, they had weight and would have.
Okay. Any other questions from the floor? Brother Mike?
Yeah, you mentioned Reisner several times. Are you talking about Dr. Reisner, the one from Harvard?
Reisner?
You mentioned Dr. Reisner,
No, I didn't.
or did I hear you incorrectly?
No, Reisner? No. Reisner did a lot of work at the end of the 19th century, right? He was a part of the Harvard study. He did work in Ethiopia. He did excavations. He worked at Naga Adur, and then he did work on excavating Napata. No, I didn't mention him.
Oh, I thought you did, but I thought you mentioned Reisner because
No.
I was going to say that anyone, first of all, that wanted a degree in Egyptology, you had to go through Reisner. And you know yourself that Dr. Hansberry had a very bad experience with it.
Leo, yeah. Well, you see, the thing is that we're dealing with people who stole the culture, okay?
Yes.
Lepsius went to Egypt in 1850s, 52, 57. He shipped 15,000 pieces of artifacts back to Berlin that became the foundation of the Berlin Museum, right? He used things like dynamite to open tombs. It wasn't clear. They were saying, well, look, if we take this to Europe, it could be preserved. So if down here, it's going to be destroyed. Reisner out of there, and this guy out of California, I can't really think of his name. The man shipped 400 boxes to the University of California. If you can imagine what's in 400 boxes, and then we talk about, they got 5,000 people working in Egypt, here, right? And each one of them, in some form of fashion, had a collection.
Well, Reisner had his museum in Boston.
Right. So they carried. You see, he was wealthy, and they were paying the people pittance today. I mean, when you hear that, he was not that digging,
Right,
you know.
right.
But he was. I mean, it's like back in colonial days, they got us into the cash crop economy. So they started the colonials control the colonial legislature in Africa, Southern Africa, we have it. And they passed these laws that required you to pay for your chickens or whatever in cash. So in order to pay your taxes, you had to work for the European who was paying cash. And therefore, you were inculcated into the cash economy. So the same thing that they did in Egypt, and they set things up so that you had to pay for everything for the most part, British crowns or British currency or French, German marks or French whatever, right? And as a result, because these people were poor in a rich land, people like Reisner who had money. You mentioned, I think I don't know if you had mentioned Breasted earlier, I think you did. Breasted who got money from Nelson Rockefeller to establish Chicago House in first of all, out of the University of Chicago,
Right.
they established Chicago House in Luxor, and whereas in his book called, of course, he did a lot of work. You know, he was a pioneer. Did the ancient records of Egypt, history of Egypt, and stuff like that. In 1916, he published Ancient Egypt, and he said that the Egyptians were thin, brown-skinned men. And then when this guy was at Celtic, you saw him there. The third You remember his name, right? But he mentioned how Nelson Rockefeller gave Breasted money to launch Chicago House, and then he started talking about the great white race. No longer talking about the Egyptians were thin, brown-skinned men, because it didn't fit the narrative of the time. So there was an illustrated image in one of these magazines. It's in one of my books or whatever, and they were showing you these British archaeologists with the tool that the mason uses, and they were covering up the Sphinx in cement, but there was a little bit of it not covered, and you could see the blackness, and they were hurrying to cover that. So they have done a lot to destroy the black image, so much so that, again, Zahi Hawass could come to Detroit and say that how the Egyptians were not Africans. But when Mubarak was president, he was the chairman he became chairman of the Organization of African Unity. Right? So the contradiction is there. You got to have the evidence to confront these people and prove your point. I'm standing on credible information. Who are the ancient Egyptians?
Well, they have
Where are the common kings? Dr. Ben, Temple of Garden. 7 letters to Mike Tyson on ancient Egyptian temples. You into nationalism? I like it well.
well, look, you can have Obenga, you can have Diop and all of these great men giving Africa to us, and all the white man has to do is make a movie with Europeans on ancient Egypt, and it blows all of that away, unless you have scholarship. So movies, because they know with black people, images that you can see, touch and feel. So that's why all these movies that they made going back to the 30s and 40s pictured Africans as subhumans. You know, Tarzan and all those movies, and movies on ancient Kemet. They use Europeans, British.
Well, you know, Dr. J got in trouble back in the 80s or whatever when he was talking about Hollywood's conspiracy to denigrate the Africans.
Yes.
Okay? And the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of information out there. Okay? There's a lot of information out there. But the fact of the matter is that even our scholars are not doing the work. Look. There's 9,500 articles here, okay, to go with this. Now, this is after all this. So I got a lot of work to do. I look at you people to help me so that I'm not really laying up at night waiting for any kind of assistance, but knowledge is expensive, okay? Knowledge is powerful. And you're not gonna get this you maybe get it in a DVD. But listen, if your DVD machine is working at home, it's no good. And you can. Kwame Nkrumah said, I live in the Bronx and I work downtown and I do all my homework, I read back and forth as I travel on the train. You can read, you can't play your DVD on the train or on the bus or in the airport, alright? But you can read a book. So I was in a printing place on Atlantic Avenue. I'm sitting there, and this young man came in and he said to the lady, he said, I want to mail this box. So she said to him, okay, you have to take out the contents of this box and put it in this box. And he opened up the box and he took out the contents, put it there, and I said, wow, it was a pair of sneakers. And I said to him, how much is that? He said, I bought it on Amazon for $600. I'm trying to sell it on eBay for $400. I said, wow. He said, I'm going to sell all of my sneakers. said, wow, but he ain't buy the book. He's like cornucopia. He looks good out there, but he ain't winning nothing. Serena was winning. She was looking pretty and what have you. Same thing like this guy. So we gotta buy the material and leave it to our children, because after a while you ain't gonna get it, right? You gotta invest in a library so that your youngster, honestly, I ain't writing for you. I'm writing for your grandchildren, because your grandchildren have said to you, Dad, grandfather, what were you doing when Dr. Monderson was writing? Oh man, I was wearing top sneakers. I mean, I'm guilty myself. Today they were mentioning on the radio that what's the guy named? Saturday Night Live, the actor, what's his name? The dancer, right? The outfit that he wore in 1975 was on sale. What's his name? Saturday Night Live.
Eddie Murphy.
Saturday Night Live. No, the dancing group, man. What's his name? Broken Arrow, and he was in the.
Oh, you're talking about Travolta.
Travolta, right? So I said, listen, I got a silk suit from China, from Hong Kong in 1970 that's never lost its color. I want to sell that. You know, what are you buying? But that's before I became enlightened. You understand me? So what are you buying for your children? You need the books. The books is the power. This is what's going to help them overcome the challenges that we face. And if you think it's going to get any better, it's going to get more difficult. And they need armaments. They need this. Yeah.
Zoom audience, any question? Okay, Dr. Monderson, can you give the audience and information if they want to purchase your massive library of books? And from Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and Sertima, and all the historians, Mackey, that talked about the greatness of Kemet in Egypt, those thousands of different dynastic periods, it seemed like Africa just maybe got old and tired, like Dr. Clark said, and how did the mistake be made?
Well, we cannot delve into the past, we can shape the future, okay? We can shape the future in an age of information, right? I consider, as Dr. Monroe had instructed me, the ancient records of the ancient records. This is it right here, okay? And this is what we gotta arm our young people with. You will be surprised what's in this. Everything that was done is in précis form here. And I'm telling you, this comes after all this, so I still working this out. I've already done the reading, what have you, right? But we have to look to the future, forget the negative things that Africa has done, emphasize the positive things, and make sure that our children, look today, right? Today, there's where is it? This woman is suing school district because her daughter is 17 years old, the only black student in the cosmetology class. And the woman is telling the girl that you don't have American hair. I have American hair. Your hair is different or whatever. They use this pejorative language. That's today, right? So how do we equip our young people to deal with what is escalating in terms of denigrating our people? My books, everything is on Amazon.com under my name, okay? And I'm trying to work as feverishly as I can to leave a record. Remember what I said, you are what you are. Tiger Woods used to say, my score is on the board, meet it. My work is already there, my body of work. But I'm not finished yet. I got lots more to do. and I look for it. I had mentioned, not that I have you here, I had mentioned the time when Jamie Foxx of Django fame, he said to John Lewis, if you need anything, call me. And John Lewis passed on, he never fulfilled that invite, right? I want to establish a library, a black research library in Brooklyn. Major Owens supported it 30 years ago. I can't get no help right now. But if I got the money, I can buy a place and take it from there. I want to put a mic in it so that we can go around the world. But it's up to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, give Dr. Monderson a great big hand. He'll be back in 2 weeks to continue
The coronation of the king.
the coronation of the king. And I
Remember now
tell you,
that King Charles is being coronated.
was a lot of stuff
right
right
now,
now.
so that's an important ceremony. So we got to understand where it started. The whole notion of the coronation is African. You know, is African because you cannot have kingship and coronation. So when there's all this hoopla about the coronation of King Charles within the next whatever couple months or whatever, we have to understand what's the roots of this and how that knowledge can help us be stronger in our understanding and in our resolve that our people are not going to be forgotten. We ain't going nowhere.
Right.
Okay? We ain't going nowhere.
Can I ask a question?
We going to fight till the last man on their side.
When you're talking about the National Geographics and the guy that sent the thing, I think it was a Canada.
Yeah.
And he was this white, pale face. Did they correct that and make that?
I don't think so. The feature cut off, right? But the point is that from the two statues that are in the Cairo Museum, right now they moved one from the old museum to the new museum. But the two statues of the king, the boy king painted black, was the true nature of it. You see, the thing is that tomb remained unopened. Zahir Hawass said that Tutankhamun is the only king we know for sure who he was because we found him in a sealed tomb. Now, many of the tombs of the nobles and the kings were opened. But guess what? They have found evidence of wooden statues broken. But still, you can see the residues of the black paint on these people, and they kick it aside. But I call it the Tutankhamun yardstick. So the Tutankhamun yardstick of the two sentinels painted black in front of the burial chamber is what applicates to all of the other kings. But because we didn't find them in a sealed tomb, we don't have any evidence of that. That's why you got to make deductions based on evidence that is here and try to make a connection to what is over there. So, but that thing about I don't think that they colored him. I mean, I spoke to this lady. I spoke when I mentioned this to this lady. You know, she said, "Did they color him?" I said, "No." Well, you could say maybe they weren't finished, but they didn't show us that. Right? They show us. You see, remember in '76 when King Tut came here, they brought the alabaster bust as the image of the king. You don't know no different. You say, well, look, alabaster is white, the king's white. Then they brought him back in, I think in '85 or whatever. They bring a kind of a brownish kind of young boy coming out to the lotus thing and say, well, see. Then they started studying him as but we have to apply the pressure so that the record can be corrected. Okay? The record can be corrected so that everybody as the man said, let's level the playing field.
Let's tell the truth.
Well, the thing is,
Tell the truth.
it's not really even about truth. It's about the facts. I mean, the evidence. Put it this way.
That's what Dr. Ben said.
The bottom line is evidence. Dr. Reisner, when he taught his classes at Harvard, he said ancient Kemet was white. Now, he got challenged by Dr. Hansberry.
Leo Hansberry.
Hansberry challenged him, and Dr. Reisner repeated, I said, because it's his class, he said, I said, ancient Kemet is white. Dr. Hansberry said at that point, well, I'm reading the works of Herodotus. And Herodotus, who was European, was there. And he said ancient Kemet was black. And he said, well, I wasn't there, but I'm telling you that
that's like what this guy, when I was at Temple, he mentioned the fact that
and you got to get a PhD, only came from his class at that time.
See, that's racism.
I don't want to call him name. What he was saying that.
Well, if you want to say the word, he told Dr. Hansberry straight up, we don't give niggas PhDs in Egyptology. That's what he said to him, straight up.
Well, that was then. Okay.
No, at that time,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But no. What I was saying is that Henry Kissinger was passing through the airport. And someone asked him the same question. Was the Egyptians white? He said, of course. What did Kissinger know? What did Kissinger know? By force of his wealth, Reisner was in there and he spent untold hours collecting. There was a systematic rape of the Nile. That's why I was so upset with Brian Fagan. Brian Fagan wrote this book in 1975 called Rape of the Nile. Alright? And then he turns around, I said, man, he pointed that out, what they did. Right? Then he turns around in 2015 and determined that Jason Townsend's Ancient Egyptians was the definitive work. So I got all 2 volumes. I looked through the book. I can't see the other name. 2 volumes. Right? This is the definitive work by a great authority called Brian Fagan. No Diop, no Benga, no Korenga, no Asa Hiller, no Hansberry, none of these people. But this is definitive work. Lorna Oakes said that Lepsius made squeezes, 15,000 squeezes. You know what's a squeeze? It's like when you get like a tracing on an illustration on a wall. He didn't do that. She said, we write for a European audience. We were not supposed to be a part of this whole experiment. You know, Dr. James always liked to say, when Tiger was born, the masters, the people in Augusta said, the black boys beating us at our own game. He was supposed to be there. We're not supposed to be interested in ancient people. We're not supposed to have the knowledge. Okay? But we do have it. And we have the daring to challenge misconceptions, misinformation, and falsity. And that's what we're doing. And we gotta stay committed to what the elders admonished us to do. I'm not talking about these charlatans that run around and say, I was with the master for 14 years. The master did not endorse you. He endorsed once.